The snow had a way of softening the world that morning, muting every rough edge, swallowing every distant sound so that the ranch felt suspended between breaths. Wade Callahan pushed open the barn door with the slow, mindful motion of a man used to waking the day gently. His boots sank into the powder, and the cold bit at the cracks in his knuckles as he tossed hay into the stalls. The horses exhaled steam like tired ghosts, their warmth rising into the pale dawn. For a moment, Wade let his eyes rest on the horizon, where the sky bruised purple against the coming storm, and he thought, as he often did, that winter had a talent for stirring old memories he'd tried hard to bury. He had just reached for the water pail when a faint sound touched his awareness so light he couldn't tell if it was real or imagined. A tapping, soft as a timid fingertip against wood. The horses didn't stir. The wind didn't shift. Still, something in him tightened. He set the pail down and stepped outside, letting the door creak shut behind him. A small figure stood at the edge of his porch, bundled in layers too thin for the cold. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes like tiny, trembling feathers. The child couldn't have been more than 8. She lifted her face as he approached, revealing eyes wide with a fear that made something old and fragile inside Wade crack open. "Sir?"
Ow!
she whispered, voice snagging on her breath. "My mom didn't come home last night." Wade felt his heartbeat thumped once, hard, as if the words themselves had weight. He crouched to meet her level, the cold of the snow biting through the knees of his jeans. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lila," she said. Her lips were tinged blue. "Lila Hale, June Hale." The name hit him like an echo. He hadn't expected to hear it spoken on his doorstep before sunrise, and certainly not in a voice trembling on the cusp of tears. June, the woman he had watched from a respectful distance, admired in quiet ways, the one who always looked like she, carried the whole world on her back, but still managed a soft smile in the general store was. Missing, Lila pulled a broken locket from her coat pocket and pressed it into her palm. "Mama wears the other half. She always comes home. Always." Wade swallowed, the cold suddenly sharper. He should have asked questions right then, where June worked last, who she'd been with, why Lila had walked through a storm alone, but the look in the girl's eyes made such thoughts feel crass. Instead, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her small frame. She shivered into its warmth like a bird pressing into a nest. "Let's get you inside for a minute," he murmured, guiding her through the door in the glow of the lantern. Her small shoulders trembled as she cupped her hands around the mug of warm water he offered. Wade stood a few steps away, unsure what words wouldn't spook her further. Silence felt like the only respectful language. Finally, Lila lifted her gaze. "I woke up, and she wasn't in the cabin. The fire was out. I waited a long time, but the wind kept getting louder and I got scared." She sniffed hard, wrinkling her nose. "Mama says you're kind." That single sentence tightened his chest more than any winter chill. He didn't answer. Instead, he retrieved his lantern, tightened the wick, and blew the flame gentle to life. Some decisions lived in the space between heartbeats. This was one of them. He had no intention of letting the child walk back alone into storm or solitude. "Stay close to me," he said softly as he led her outside. The snow fell heavier, now flakes thick and deliberate, like winter had decided the world needed to be rewritten in white. Wade saddled his old bay mare, lifting Lila carefully onto the saddle blanket before swinging up behind her. She leaned into him with the weary trust only children possess, and he felt responsible in a way that humbled him deeply as they reached the outskirts of town. The wind shifted, carrying with it the low murmur of voices. Dry Creek didn't wait gracefully. Its saloon lamps still flickered from last night's revelry. Footsteps dragged through the slush as early workers trudged to their posts. Etta Mae Dunlow, sweeping the saloon porch, squinted at the sight of Wade carrying a child in his coat. Gossip traveled faster than fire in a drought. "Ain't that June's girl?" she called, brows rising with judgment masked as curiosity. "Where's her mama run off to now?" Lila stiffened, leaning closer to Wade. He felt the bristle of protectiveness rise in him like heat from coals. "We're looking for her," he said, voice even. Seen June this morning? No, Etta replied too quickly. But trouble always did seem to follow that woman. Alila's breath hitched at that, but she said nothing. Wade nudged the mare forward before his simmering irritation could spill into words he'd regret. Sheriff Amos Brigg, a tall man carved from stubbornness and ritual, stepped out of his office when he saw them approach. His mustache bristled with frost. "Callahan," he greeted. "Something the matter?" "June Hale's missing," Wade said. Lila found her cabin empty. Briggs sighed, the kind of sigh that said he'd rather blame the weather than believe in danger. "Storm came in rough last night. Folks hole up all the time. She's probably at a neighbor's or stuck at the mining office. Found her fire out," Lila whispered. "Mama never lets it die." The sheriff's expression flickered, but only for a heartbeat. "We'll check around later. Let the storm settle first." Wade felt the thin thread of patience snap quietly inside him. Later might be too late. Brigg gave him a look, the kind that said Wade's past mistakes still shadowed.
Out.
How the town saw him, but he stepped back without arguing. Wade didn't wait for permission. He turned the mare toward the mining district. Dry Creek's boundaries blurred into white, lanterns flickering like distant, trembling stars. A miner stacking crates near the path hesitated as Wade passed. After a moment, he hurried up, eyes darting around nervously. "Callahan," he whispered. "If you're looking for June, she left the Crowder office late last night." Silas was mad about something, real mad. Folks said he followed her out. Wade didn't need explanation. Silas Crowder was a man who held power the way some men held grudges. Tight, mean, and without reason. The miner stepped back, fear settling in the tightness of his jaw. "I ain't saying more. Don't bring my name into it." Wade nodded. Lila's small fingers tightened around the saddle blanket. Her voice trembled. "Silas scared Mama sometimes." That was all Wade needed to hear as they left town behind. The world quieted into a deeper kind of stillness, the kind that announces something important is about to happen. Snow-covered pines lined the trail like mourners. Lila rode silently, her small hands gripping the horn of the saddle. Her breaths came out in uneven clouds. After half an hour, Wade slowed the mare near the frozen creek. Something in the underbrush caught his aja scrap of deep blue snagged on a low branch. He dismounted, lifting it carefully. The fabric was soft, familiar. June's scarf. Lila slid off the horse before he could stop her, stumbling toward the scarf with a sob caught in her throat. Wade knelt, placing the scarf into her hands gently, watching her clutch it like a lifeline. Nearby, half hidden under snowfall, lay more signs of hairpin, trampled brush, and irregular footprints leading toward the ridge. A struggle had taken place here. There was no mistaking the frantic marks. Wade felt a cold dread coil low in his stomach. But he kept his voice steady for Lila's sake. She was here. She fought to get away. That means she's alive. Lila nodded, though tears streaked her cheeks, turning cold as they fell. The sun sank behind thickening clouds, turning the sky into a dim, bruised canvas. Wade lifted the lantern, its light flickering across the path ahead, a narrow, winding climb into the deeper forest. "We're not turning back," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "Not tonight." Lila slipped her small hand into his without asking. The storm gathered its icy breath, and together they stepped forward, two shadows against the whitening world, following the fragile thread of hope left behind in the snow. The wind sharpened as they moved deeper into the pines, no longer whispering but pushing against them in long, mournful breaths. Lila clung to Wade's hand, her steps small yet determined, as if the snow itself might swallow her mother's trail if she hesitated. Wade lifted the lantern higher, letting its faint gold sweep across the forest floor, searching for even the slightest break in the white silence. Tracks blurred by snowfall appeared in fragments: an overturned pinnacone, a bent stem, a heel mark softened into a pale impression. Wade read them as if reading a wounded story, each clue guiding him further into the teeth of the storm. The pines thinned enough to reveal an old-line shack crouched beneath a ledge of rock, a lonely silhouette in the swirling dark. A thin ribbon of smoke unraveled from the crooked chimney, wavering in the wind like a signal barely strong enough to hold on. Lila gasped softly, hope and dread mingling in that small sound. Wade motioned for her to stay behind him as he approached, lantern forward, boots sinking quietly into the accumulating drifts. The door groaned when he pushed it open. The warmth inside was weak, barely enough to melt the frost clinging to the windows. Papers lay scattered across the rough-hewn floor, documents torn from the mining office, Wade recognized. June's coat hung over a chair, still damp around the hem, but the room was empty. The air felt wrong, lived in, hurried, fearful. Lila stepped beside him, the scarf bundled near her cheek. Her eyes scanned the room hungrily, searching for any sign of her mother. Wade crouched near the hearth, touching the ashes. Still warm. June had been here recently, but not willingly. A crunch sounded outside one deliberate step in the snow. Wade stood up slowly, instinct tightening his shoulders. Lila's small hand slipped into his coat, hiding in the fabric. A figure emerged through the doorway's frame, the lantern light catching the edge of a familiar scowl. Silas Crowder filled the space like a storm of his own. Shoulders broad beneath his coat, eyes glinting with an unease too carefully masked. "Didn't expect company," he drawled, voice slick with false calm. "Storm's got folks wandering in places they shouldn't." Wade didn't raise his lantern or his voice. "Where's June?" Silas shrugged, casual as a man flicking dust from his sleeve. "Woman left after her shift. Ain't my business where she goes." But there were signs. Wade saw them in the damp snow on Silas's boots, in the torn paper clinging to his coat, in the faint scrape on his knuckles, and something else, a flicker in his gaze when he noticed the scarf in Lila's hands. A nervous twitch that betrayed a truth he hadn't meant to show. Lila stepped forward, her voice shaking. "You were yelling at Mama last night?" Silas's jaw tightened. Your mama owed answers. She wasn't giving him. That's between grown folks. Wade stepped just enough to shield Lila. If June walked out of here alive, the snow would show it. Yet there's confusion in the tracks. A struggle. Silas's lips curled. "You think you can read snow better than me? It ain't the snow I'm readin'." Wade held his gaze steady as winter stone. Silas's smile faltered, replaced by something raw. "She ran," he muttered, panicked. "I told her to calm down, but she ran into the ridge like a fool. I tried to stop her before she got herself hurt." The confession was tangled in half-truths, but Wade heard the underlying strained fear. Desperation, the unraveling of a man losing control of his own lies. Without another word, Wade stepped outside, inspecting the chaotic marks leading away from the shack. Branches snapped in a hurried path toward the old mining cut. The prints were lighter ahead, as though someone had been forced or had stumbled. Lila's breath hitched as she saw the trail Warren pointed toward. "Mama doesn't know these woods well," she whispered. "Then we keep close," Wade said. He felt Silas's eyes burning into his back, but the man didn't follow. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe guilt had begun to drag him down like a weight tied to his ankles. The climb toward the ridge grew steeper, the wind slicing like a reprimand. Wade carried Lila for part of the way, her small arms looped around his neck. Her cheek pressed against his shoulder as if drawing courage from his heartbeat. Their lantern sputtered in the gusts, but it kept burning, a fragile, stubborn flame, much like hope itself. A faint cry broke the wind's monotony. Not loud, not clear, but undeniably human. Wade froze for a beat, heart thrumming. Lila lifted her head. "Mama," she breathed. They pushed forward. The mouth of the old mine appeared through sheets of snow, half collapsed, timbers jutting out like broken ribs. A figure lay partly buried near the entrance, struggling to lift an arm. Wade rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "June," he murmured, his voice cracking in ways he couldn't hide. Her eyes fluttered open, pain clouding them, but relief shining through. "Lila," she whispered. "I kept calling for her. I didn't think anyone would hear me." Lila stumbled into her arms, sobbing into her mother's chest. June held her with trembling strength, pressing her face into Lila's hair. Wade touched June's shoulder gently, grounding her, promising safety without needing words. The snap of a branch behind them came like a warning. Silas's silhouette emerged through the storm, his steps unsteady, his breath ragged. He held a gun not steadily, but like a man drowning in panic. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, voice quivering beneath bravado. "She wouldn't listen. Said she'd tell folks what she saw in those papers. You don't know what kind of trouble that'd bring." Wade stepped between Silas and the mother and child, palms open. "Then don't add more trouble. Put the gun down." Silas's eyes darted, flashing with regret, anger, and fear. The storm's howl filled the moment between them, stretching it thin. Snowflakes spiraled through the lantern light like falling ash. "You think you can take everything I built?" Silas choked. "You? A washed-up rancher nobody listens to?" Wade didn't flinch. "I ain't here to take anything. I'm here to bring a girl's mother home." The stillness that followed was deep enough to hear the snow settling. Silas shuddered, his resolve breaking inch by inch. But guilt has a way of turning into reckless motion. Wade moved faster not out of violence, but necessity grabbing Silas's wrist and twisting with controlled force. The gun fell into the snow with a muted thud. Silas collapsed, sobbing into the drift, the storm swallowing the rest of his fight. Wade kicked the gun away and turned back to June. She was shaking, not just from cold, but from the emotional weight of survival. He knelt beside her and supported her carefully, lifting her into his arms. The return to town felt like walking through a dream, a hard one, but with the kind of ending that warms even the coldest memories. Lantern light flickered in windows as Wade carried June past the saloon. People gathered, whispering pity and shame into the icy air. Etta May lowered her eyes when she saw the bruises on June's wrist, her gaze slipping away with guilt. Sheriff Briggs stepped forward, eyes widening as he took in the scene. No one questioned Wade. No one doubted what had happened. Some truths walk into town carried in someone's arms. Wade brought June and Lila home with him to the ranch, the storm easing into a hush behind them. Inside the warm cabin, June lay wrapped in blankets, while Lila curled at her side, refusing to let go of her mother's hand. Wade sat nearby, quietly mending the tears in June's coat, his fingers moving with a gentleness he didn't know he still possessed. In the days that followed, June regained strength. She laughed softly at Lila's attempts to braid her hair, winced through the healing aches, and watched Wade with a gratitude that lived deeper than spoken thanks. One morning, as the sun bled gold across the snow, June joined him outside. She moved slowly but with determination. Together they fed the horses while Lila chased her own breath clouds through the yard. Their connection is spoken, fragile, but unmistakably real grew in the spaces between gestures. Wade handed June a warm cup without looking at her. June brushed snow off his coat without announcing her intent. Lila drew 3 stick figures on the frosted window, a mother, a daughter, and a man standing quietly beside them. The world didn't need to name what was forming. Some things grow best without labels, like wildflowers blooming between stones. As the winter softened and the days lengthened, Wade often thought about that night, the cold, the fear. The fragile lives crossing in a storm big enough to swallow them whole. It struck him, again and again, how a single act of courage can reroute the course of a life. How kindness offered at the right moment becomes a lantern against the world's darker winds. And if one lesson remained clear, it was this: even in the loneliest winters, the heart remembers how to thaw.